So all this area was evacuated all the way. So the city limits are right here at Green Meadows. And this was all Green Meadows was evacuated. CERT was in Green Meadows doing the evacuations. They did a great job. They evacuated 108 or 110 houses in a pretty short amount of time. But the reason I wanted to come here first was just to get a larger perspective on the landscape the fire was burning in, and also what we've done through management in the past to try to provide opportunities to contain fires. And that was a successful strategy, I'm happy to say, during the Siskiyou Fire last fall. The idea behind this approach is to know before a fire ever starts where we're going to stop it, or at least where we have the best opportunities to stop it. And the tactical opportunities are those places on the landscape where there's a topographically advantageous area that's not a really steep slope, it's not a canyon, it's typically either a broad open area like this here, or a ridge top, someplace that fire vehicles can get to if it's going to be a direct attack on the fire, or someplace perhaps close to water source if helicopters are going to be relied on. And to my knowledge, and I've talked to a bunch of people in the business, nobody else has maps like this. And I don't know why necessarily, but having something like this was so valuable during the fire, because first, when I got to the command post, when it started, people were leaning over and looking at little District 5 maps that are almost hand-drawn with addresses, and they don't have any topography or fuels reduction information or anything on them. And landscape scale, where the fire was to the watershed, is not very far at all, and it was moving that direction. So, just from here, here's Rita Reservoir, where all of the city's municipal water is collected, and we're only that far away. Each one of these squares is a square mile. So we were only 2 miles away from Rita Reservoir, only a mile away from the watershed boundary on the fire. I don't think that too many people talked necessarily about the watershed during the fire. We talked about homes and a lot of other things, but because it stopped, we kind of lost track of how close it really was to going into the watershed.
Chris, how much did it just burn where it burned naturally, and how much of an effort was there to push it up the hill and keep it away from where more of the homes are?
It's a good question. The weather on that day was interesting in that the wind was really strong. The fire started over the top of the ridge there that's with the blackened trees over on Siskiyou Boulevard. So the wind was really strong, pushing directly out of the east straight towards us. And then when it got to this side, the wind either had shifted a little bit and or was also pushing a little bit downhill through the canyons. So, in some ways, the wind did control a little bit of what the fire did on this side when it got over to Tolman Creek. But at the same time, we'd also done a lot of fuels reduction work in the oak woodlands.
It was this combination of things that happened here in this fire. The immediacy of the response, the amount of the response, the fact that fuel reduction had been done, allowed this particular fire to be caught and maintained in this location. And I think if any one of those things hadn't occurred, I think it's a really good chance that this fire would have grown much bigger in a hurry.
This is the biggest fire since 1973 in Ashland. The 73 fire actually is that hillside on the skyline right there, so we're kind of sandwiched between the two larger fires in recent history. This one added to the mix, and this one's relatively small, 188 acres. That one was 350. The 59 fire was 3,000 some odd acres, I think. Some people call it 5,000. I'm not sure exactly how big it was, but 3,000 to 5,000, we'll say. So this, relatively speaking, is kind of a small fire. And if you look at other wildfires, of course, across the western United States, that's really small when you get into. But by the time the fire got here, it was just, if you look at along the trunks of the trees, how far up the black scorch goes, it's a pretty good indicator of how hot the fire was, and there's not significant scorch up here, which means the fire was probably on the ground and the canopy is not affected. It's probably a little dried out, but it wasn't burned. But the scorch on the trees is pretty minimal, 4 or 5 feet, probably a little higher here and there. That's an indication that you can attack the fire with ground crews, bulldozers. There's a kind of a rule of thumb that flames 4 feet and greater, you don't attack directly with people and machinery like that. You get to be relying on aircraft and indirect attack burnouts.
Which was like a lot of the other side, right?
The other side was a totally different story.
Yeah, there was no real people up there.
40 and 50 foot flames instead of 4 to 6 foot flames.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's like